We're going to begin a new series for Na'aleh, which is Li'ilui Nishmas Rachalea Bas Rav Chaim Tzil Shalom. And this is a series about the Musar movement, the movement of ethical perfection. What is the most logical place to begin this? Of course, with its founder, Rav Yisrael Salanter. I mentioned at the very outset that people call him Rabbi Salanter, which is erroneous by virtue of the fact his last name is Lipkin. This is not a critical point, but that would be like calling someone Deborah Bostoner or Bebra Chicagoer. People were called from the town they came from, but that was not their last name. Okay, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter had a perspective. He saw things quite differently than other people. And the whole idea of Musar, of ethical perfection, of moral sensitivity is, I'm not worried about myself, I'm concerned about the other person. I'm not trying to correct the other person, I'm worried about correcting myself. In other words, there's only one person in the world that we can rectify, repair, and correct. We spend all our attention and all our energy and trying to repair other people, and not ourselves, the only person that in fact we can rectify. And what do? We scream, we shout, we yell, we rant, and there's no one who's ever been repaired or improved by that, and yet we haven't changed our methodology. Comes a Musar movement with a new perspective. Let me try and begin with a chakira. I wish I knew how to say this in English. Perhaps I can call it a tautology. How do you look at a zebra? Is a zebra a black animal with white stripes? Or is it a white animal with black stripes? And we can argue this forever, and it's hard to know. But what happens is, and I know very little about psychology, there is a zebra phenomenon where you see only black and not even the white. Now this is something which is fundamentally infantile, albeit adults do it as well. For example, the child begs from his mother, please give me a chocolate bar. And the mother refuses. Please, I beg of you a chocolate bar. And the mother refuses. Oh, please. No. Please, no. The child says, I hate you. For at this point the child only sees black and is oblivious to any white. So what do we see when we're looking at something? And here Rav Yisrael Salanter had this remarkable perspective. Because two people can look at the same thing and see different things. And how is that possible? I will soon explain. But comes Rav Yisrael Salanter with a new perspective. For example, he writes in his Sefer, he writes in his book that he was praying on Yom Kippur, and he's at the table praying, and he sees a man who's crying and crying and crying with his prayers, which are so devout and pious, and tears are cascading down his cheeks, and his machzor, his prayer book, is moist from the tears. And Rav Yisrael Salanter has this tshuka, this craving, this yearning, this desire to pray from a prayer book that is moist from tears. Now he's not going to take the prayer book, he just wants to look on one kapitel, one little prayer. He looks on, the fellow shoves him away. So Rav Yisrael Salanter, now I know it's time to make a Musar movement. It's time to get people aware of the need. Now, two people could look at the scene and not see the same thing, but he had a unique perspective. And again, come back to my question. How could it be that two people could look at the same thing and not yet see the same thing? I'll give you an analogy. Let's say, now my analogy comes from what it says regarding the Akedah, the binding of Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. Now, Rashi hints at this. You'll find it much better explained in the Medrash Tanchuma. And this is what it says. It was a party of 4+ that departed for the binding. It was Abraham and Isaac and the two lads, Yishmael and Eliezer, plus the donkey. If the Torah saw it fit to mention the donkey, we'll mention as well. Again, 4 depart, Abraham, Yitzchak, Eliezer, Yishmael, and the donkey. As they're traveling towards the mountain where the binding will take place, Har Moriah, Mount Moriah, from the distance they see the mountain, and it says the following. This is what it says in the Medrash. Abraham looks out and he says to my son, he says, Yitzchak, do you see what I see? He said, yes, my father, I see it. He then turned to the lads and he asked, and do you see it? And they said, no. Now how can that be? That two people can look at the same thing and see different things. I'll provide an analogy. 2 analogies. You walk into a physics lab, and there you have a smoky box of glass, which is a Wilson cloud chamber, where electrons are shot through, and I ask you, what's this? You tell me it's a smoky box of glass. I'm a physicist, I realize it's a Wilson cloud chamber. We both look at the same thing, yet we perceive different things. You see a box of glass, I see a Wilson cloud chamber. I'll sing a little tune for you. Na 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 na. So what am I singing? She thinks a little melody, at best. And I think it's Schubert's Unfinished Symphony. We both heard the same thing, yet we perceive different things. You hear a little melody. I hear Schubert's Unfinished. And it was on the third day. And Avram looked down and said, my son, do you see what I see? Yes, my father. For he perceived that those clouds on top of the mountain, that was God's holy presence. Eliezer, Shmuel, do you see it? And they saw scenery. You don't see it? You stay with the donkey. He's myopic. You're myopic. You stay here. And we shall continue. And that's always the way it is. For two people can look at the same thing and see different things. A carpenter walks into the room, he notices the woodwork. An electrician comes into the room, he notices the electrical work. A CIA agent comes into the room, he notices a bug. I also see a bug. I see a bug. I was referring to the listening device and not to the insect. Which reminds